Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair. When did Finance first learn that Treasury made unlawful payments to the tune of $2.3 billion?
Just get the relevant officers to the table. I'm not sure whether we will have a specific date for you, Senator.
Let's see how we go.
Senator Lucinda Atkinson, First Assistant Secretary, Governance and Resource Management Group. We first became aware on the 10th of November when the breach was reported in the AFR.
Right. I would have thought that Treasury would have brought it to your attention earlier. Obviously not. Finance Treasury departments that work pretty closely together. This hasn't come up prior to media coverage?
Sorry, Senator Anna Harmer, Acting Deputy Secretary, Governance and Resource Management. It might assist if Ms Fox sets out perhaps a bit about how we would typically become aware of such breaches.
Yep.
So we receive certain information through the reporting of financial statements, which is the normal form in which we would expect to become aware of a breach of this nature. Those are declared in those statements, and Ms Fox can perhaps outline how those are received and when they are provided to us and when those might be typically published.
Please.
So Amy Fox, First Assistant Secretary, Governance and Resource Management. So breaches of Section 83 are required under finance policy to be disclosed in entity financial statements, as was the case in this particular example. And they're also referenced in summary in the consolidated financial statements, which for this financial year are yet to be tabled, but very soon. We collate information from across the APS from entities on an annual basis to prepare for the consolidated financial statements. So Treasury did include information in their financial statements, as you would be aware, as part of usual and expected process in working with us in our preparation of the consolidated financial statements. Those statements, as you would know, are generally audited by the Auditor General. No issues reported by the Auditor General in their work with us. And we do work very closely with officers of the ANAO. There are a number of standard disclosures required when a breach of Section 83 occurs, and Treasury have complied with those disclosures in their financial statements. I understand in this particular example a valid appropriation existed, and it was more an issue of delegation, and represented in total about 1% of these types of payments that Treasury make. That's an overview of the process.
There was an appropriation, but there was no ministerial authorisation. And didn't the appropriation require a ministerial authorisation?
So there should have been a delegation in place, which I think Treasury have disclosed, but you would need to discuss that with the Treasury Secretary when Treasury appear tomorrow. I believe it's tomorrow.
Yeah, and I will. What role does finance have in ensuring that expenditure by the Commonwealth is properly appropriated and follows due process?
So we issue policy and guidance to entities. As you would know, the PGPA Act is a devolved framework, so accountable authorities have ultimate responsibility for internal controls within their entities. We don't have a particular compliance role in terms of checking detailed transactions, but we do require entities to include information in their disclosures, in their financial statements, as I mentioned. And on this occasion, Treasury have complied with that requirement, which is, of course, how the AFR have come across this particular example.
Sure, but maybe it's just my naivety, but it kind of seems a little informal for finance to learn that Treasury broke the Constitution to the tune of $2.3 billion through media reporting and not some kind of formal notification or reporting from Treasury.
So, Senator, as I said, I think the reporting came to us through the financial statements, as Ms Fox has outlined. I think, as Ms Atkinson mentioned, we were aware of the reporting. I think there's simply a question of timing here. It may be best to follow up with Treasury just in relation to the timing of the publication of their statements and sharing of those with us. But the reporting of the breach has been made to us in the manner that we would normally expect it to be through the compilation of their financial statements, which are then consolidated with the broader Commonwealth financial statements.
I do look forward to discussing with Treasury, but I'm still just a little bit perplexed that, as you say, it is a question of timing, but I think timing is important. Shouldn't this be something that is notified by Treasury to Finance prior to the media reporting on it? Shouldn't finance have better means of finding out that billions of dollars have been spent unlawfully than relying on a subscription to the AFR? Great newspaper that it is.
So I think what I would say to that is those are questions of judgment and that perhaps they might be put to the Treasury, but we have received the information in the way that we would normally expect to do so. Whether there might be a question of providing it to us in an additional form as well is perhaps a question of judgment.
How long after the article was published in the AFR did Finance receive the notification through those channels that were described?
Senator, I believe I'd have to take that on notice just to have a look at the timeline.
Do any of the other officers have any insight onto that?
So we receive various forms of information from across APS entities in their financial statements as they are audited and then as they are subsequently tabled. So we would have received this information from Treasury in their financial statements at some point around when the annual report was tabled. I don't have the annual report tabling date in front of me, but I believe it was mid-October.
But I think the article was published on the 10th of November. So if they published their annual report in October, how come you weren't aware of it then?
So we do issue what we call a supplementary reporting pack to entities to collate different pieces of information that they wouldn't otherwise disclose in their financial statements. Section 83 breaches are not something that we collate through that particular mechanism. So it's not unusual for us not to have a full gambit of information that entities might be including within their financial statements. As you would know, they go through various review processes, including through audit and risk committees, etc., and then through the Auditor General. So often there are things that are amended and changed very close to the time of financial statements being signed.
I guess what I'm trying to work out is if you didn't have a subscription to the AFR, when would you have first found out?
So as a general rule for Section 83 breaches, we will identify that information by going through entities' financial statements as part of our collation of the consolidated financial statements. That would be, from my perspective, the first opportunity that we would have to have full visibility of that information. There's no, we don't have...
So when would that be? Just give me a time.
Month of October, we prepare the consolidated financial statements.
I'm confused. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm genuinely trying to understand here. If this is something you would find out in October, but your evidence is you didn't hear about it until it was in the AFR in November, what happened there?
So it wasn't specifically reported to us, but it would have been within Treasury's financial statements. Part of our process to consolidate the Commonwealth financial statements is quite extensive, and I'm not sure at what point we would have looked at Treasury's financial statements to identify this information. It definitely happened after the AFR article, but as to when officers in the department specifically looked at this, I can't answer that question for you at the moment, I'm sorry.
Okay, so kind of didn't get around to looking at the documents, would have in due course?
It would have in due course. It would not have been, I did not get around to looking at the documents. We consolidate over 200 entities into the consolidated financial statements. It is quite an extensive process for us to go through.
But this is not a small breach. This is $2.3 billion of public money.
We don't specifically just look at disclosures for breaches. We have to look at all of the disclosures that are made. So, yeah.
Okay. Minister, when did you first learn about this?
I think for me it was when the media reports became public.
Right, so the Treasurer didn't mention it in passing. Oh, by the way, Minister, I think we made a boo-boo to the tune of $2.3 billion.
Well, I think I've answered, and I mean from the information I had was the department itself, and I'm sure you'll go into this tomorrow, had identified the problem, reported it, fixed it, and I think that is the most important part about what has happened here.
I would say the most important part is not unlawfully spending public money. So the Treasurer's office didn't raise it with your office prior to the media reports?
I've answered the question of about when I became aware of it.
Well, the first question was about you personally, and this question is about your office.
I'll come back on that. I don't recall, and I don't think so, but I will check the record.
Don't you think it'd be a good idea for the Finance Minister to know that billions of dollars of public money had been spent unlawfully?
Well, when I looked into it, Senator Patterson, what I understood was that there was authority for these payments to be made, there was a problem around the delegation and the ministerial approval, I think, but the department itself had identified the error, had self-reported it and had addressed it. And that, to me, is the most important thing. I don't think anyone is suggesting that those payments being made to the states didn't have authority. We had been very clear about that.
They literally didn't have ministerial authority. That's what they lacked, a ministerial authorisation. The Treasury Department spent money
the authority
without the Treasurer's written
was granted
approval.
From normal government processes, an agreement, and I think we were very upfront about it. Anyway, the issue here is those questions should be. I'm morphing into Treasury estimates tomorrow, and I will be there tomorrow. But I think those things should be put to the Treasury.
I do look forward to discussing it.
And I think there have been, you know, I think there have been errors of this type. I mean, that happen across the public service, including in the Treasury before, including when you were in government. I mean, they happen.
Sure.
People just need, you know, we have to ensure there's an environment where a problem is identified, that it's reported and fixed and processes are changed. That's the most important thing about here. Yes, I agree. I know where you're going next, but that is the point here. When a problem, the worst thing would be to create an environment where people have made a mistake or an error and it isn't reported and it isn't, people aren't made aware.
No one is suggesting that's a good idea.
Either.
Literally no one's suggesting that's a good idea. What I'm interested in is that as Finance Minister, your counterpart, the Treasurer, did not tell you, nor officers nor departments, and you also were reliant on a subscription to the AFR to find out that money had been spent unlawfully by the federal government to the tune of $2.3 billion. You're the Finance Minister. Shouldn't you have known? Other than via media reporting?
It was reported in the normal way, and it has been dealt with through the consolidated statements as well. So all of the areas where it should have been transparent and notified have been undertaken, and that is important.
Yeah, I mean, I just... You're not more curious about how this happened and not more concerned about this?
Well, of course I looked into it. But
okay, what steps did you take to look into it?
Well, I was satisfied that when I saw that the problem had been identified, self-reported and fixed, that addressed the problem.
Were you satisfied that you were learning about it through a media report, not through a formal reporting mechanism?
Well, I also, I mean, it comes through the consolidated statements, and it did. Yes,
but as we've heard, not until after it was reported on in the Financial Review.
I think we're checking all of those dates. But it's come through and been identified and declared as you would expect it to be done.
No, it's not as I would expect it to be done. I would expect it to be done
as
formally.
You would expect it to be done when a problem has been identified and reported.
No. Then it's not as I would expect it anyway. Maybe I'm unique in this, but I would have thought that...
Go back and have a look at all the times you had to do it when you were in government, Senator Patterson.
We asked the ANO about this and they said they couldn't remember an occasion with this amount of money involved. Maybe if you go back far enough, there is billions of dollars that were illegally spent.
That's the nature of the program, isn't it? It is a big program, being payments to the states and territories.
Yes, and you would think with such a large number of money, such a large amount of money involved, that I's would be dotted and the T's would be crossed.
Well, and that's why the department has identified the problem and fixed it.
But just not notified you or your department.
Well, they have notified the department through the normal way.
Yeah,
as you would expect.
After it was reported on in the media. Anyway, I think we're probably not going to get much further on that.
I'm going to rotate the call when you're ready,
This is a good time
Senator
because I'm
Patterson.
changing topics. So.
Excellent.